What if I told you that moving to a different city could cut 10 years off your path to financial independence? Not changing careers, not earning more, not taking more investment risk, just relocating. Sounds too simple, right? But the mathematics are undeniable. At BlackRock, we've modeled wealth accumulation across different geographies, and the numbers are staggering. A household earning $120,000 in Austin, Texas can accumulate wealth faster than a household earning $200,000 in Manhattan. Not slightly faster, dramatically faster. This is geographic arbitrage, and it's the wealth building strategy that the FIRE community discovered, that remote work has made accessible to millions, and that almost nobody in traditional finance talks about. Today, I'm going to break down exactly how location determines your wealth timeline, show you the real numbers behind cost of living arbitrage, and give you a framework for making strategic location decisions that could be worth 7 figures over your lifetime. Before we dive in, I want to ask for your support. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel with notifications enabled. It helps us continue creating this kind of detailed financial content that you won't find anywhere else. You know, I've spent nearly 50 years thinking about wealth creation, about capital markets, about asset allocation, about risk and return. But there's one variable that we in the investment management industry have largely ignored, one factor that has more impact on most people's ability to accumulate wealth than their investment strategy, their savings rate, or even their income level. And that variable is geography. Where you live. This might sound strange coming from someone who runs the largest asset management firm in the world. We're supposed to tell you about portfolio optimization, about diversification, about alpha generation. And those things matter. They absolutely do. But I've come to realize that for the vast majority of people trying to build wealth, the single biggest decision they make isn't which stocks to buy or which funds to invest in. It's where they choose to live. Let me give you some numbers that will make this concrete. Take 2 software engineers, both 28 years old, both earning what seems like good money. Engineer A lives in San Francisco, makes $180,000 a year. Engineer B lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, makes $110,000 a year. Engineer A is making 64% more in absolute dollars. You'd think Engineer A would accumulate wealth faster, right? Wrong. Let me show you what actually happens. Engineer A in San Francisco, after federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, takes home about $120,000. Their rent for a decent 1-bedroom apartment is $3,500 per month, $42,000 per year. That's already 35% of their after-tax income gone just on rent. Add in higher food costs, higher transportation costs, higher insurance, higher everything, and their actual cost of living is around $75,000 to $80,000 per year. That leaves them with maybe $40,000 to $45,000 to save and invest. Engineer B in Raleigh, after federal taxes and state taxes, which are lower, takes home about $80,000. Their rent for a comparable or even nicer 1-bedroom apartment is $1,400 per month, $16,800 per year. That's only 21% of their after-tax income. Their overall cost of living is around $45,000 per year. That leaves them with $35,000 to save and invest. Now, you might say, Larry, Engineer A is still saving more. $45,000 versus $35,000. They're ahead. But wait, we're not done. Because there's another factor. The opportunity to buy a home and build equity. In San Francisco, a starter home costs $1.2 million, maybe more. With 20% down, that's $240,000 just for the down payment. At a savings rate of $45,000 per year, it takes more than 5 years just to save for the down payment, assuming they don't invest that money and it doesn't grow. In Raleigh, a comparable or better home costs $350,000. With 20% down, that's $70,000. At a savings rate of $35,000 per year, they can save for that down payment in 2 years. They buy the home at age 30. They start building equity. Their housing payment is fixed. Meanwhile, Engineer A is still renting in San Francisco at ever-increasing rents, trying to save for that massive down payment. Fast forward 10 years. Engineer B owns a home that's appreciated, has built substantial equity through mortgage paydown, and has been consistently investing $35,000 per year in retirement accounts and taxable accounts. Engineer A might have finally bought a home, or might still be renting, has been burning through money on rent for a decade, and yes, has been investing, but not as consistently and not with the same compounding effect. Run the full analysis out to age 50. model career progression, model investment returns, model home appreciation, and here's what you find. Engineer B in Raleigh ends up with more wealth. Not a little more. Significantly more. Maybe $300,000 to $500,000 more. Same profession. Same work ethic. Different location. Different wealth outcome. This is what I mean by geographic arbitrage. And this isn't some hypothetical example I made up. This is based on actual data we've analyzed. Real cost of living numbers. Real salary data. Real housing prices. Real tax rates. The math is clear. Location is one of the most important wealth variables. Now, you might be thinking, but Larry, this is cherry picking. San Francisco versus Raleigh is an extreme comparison. And you're right, it is extreme. It's meant to illustrate the principle dramatically. But the principle holds across countless city pairs. Boston versus Charlotte, New York versus Nashville, Los Angeles versus Phoenix, Seattle versus Salt Lake City. In almost every case, the lower cost of living location allows for faster wealth accumulation, even with a lower nominal salary, as long as the salary differential isn't too extreme. And here's what's changed in the last few years that makes this so relevant right now: remote work. Before 2020, if you wanted to work for a top tech company, a top financial services firm, a top consulting firm, you generally had to live in New York, San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, maybe a handful of other expensive cities. You had no choice. You went where the jobs were. You paid the cost of living. And you accepted that as the price of career success. But COVID changed everything. Millions of knowledge workers discovered they could work from anywhere. Companies discovered that remote work was viable, even productive. And suddenly, you could have a six-figure salary from a coastal company while living in a much lower-cost location. You could arbitrage geography. You could have the income of San Francisco with the cost of living of Austin or Boise or Tampa or Nashville. At BlackRock, we saw this in our own workforce. We had people who'd been living in Manhattan, paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month for small apartments, who moved to North Carolina, to Texas, to Florida, and bought beautiful homes for less than what they were paying annually in rent. Same jobs, same salaries, at least initially. Dramatically different financial situations. And what we've observed is that these people, the ones who made strategic location decisions, they're accumulating wealth faster than their peers who stayed in expensive cities. They're paying off student loans faster. They're maxing out 401ks more easily. They're building emergency funds. They're investing in taxable accounts. They're buying homes. They're building equity. They're reaching financial milestones years ahead of schedule. This is not about lifestyle quality. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not saying everyone should leave big cities. I'm not saying expensive cities are bad places to live. New York, San Francisco, Boston, these are incredible cities with amazing cultural amenities, career opportunities, diversity, energy. Many people choose to live there because they value what those cities offer, and they're willing to pay for it. That's a legitimate choice. That's a values-based decision. But what I am saying is that you need to understand the financial trade-off you're making. You need to quantify it. You need to know what living in an expensive city is actually costing you in terms of wealth accumulation. And you need to make a conscious, informed decision about whether that trade-off is worth it for you. Because here's what I've seen over and over again. People live in expensive cities by default, not by design. They live there because that's where they went to college. That's where they got their first job. That's where their friends are. That's what's familiar. They've never seriously considered alternatives. They've never run the numbers. They've never asked themselves, what would my financial situation look like if I lived somewhere else? And then they wake up at age 40 or 45, and they realize they've been on a treadmill for 15 or 20 years. They've been making good money, but they haven't accumulated much wealth. They're still renting, or they bought a home so expensive that it's eating half their income. They have credit card debt. They haven't maxed out their retirement accounts. They're stressed about money despite having a high income. And they wonder what went wrong. What went wrong is that they focused on income and ignored costs. They optimized for salary and ignored geography. They thought wealth was a function of how much you earn, when in reality, wealth is a function of how much you earn minus how much you spend, multiplied by how many years you compound your investments. This is the trap of high-cost cities. Yes, you can earn more. But you also spend more. Often much more. And the spending increase can exceed the income increase, leaving you worse off in absolute terms. I've seen people make the jump from a $90,000 job in Columbus, Ohio to a $140,000 job in San Francisco, thinking they're upgrading their financial situation, only to discover that after accounting for cost of living, they're actually saving less money than before. They've traded up in nominal terms but down in real terms. This is what traditional personal finance advice misses. We tell people to increase their income, get promoted, change jobs for higher pay, negotiate better salaries, and all of that is good advice. But if you increase your income by 30% and your cost of living increases by 50%, you've moved backwards financially. The advice is incomplete without considering the geographic component. At BlackRock, when we think about wealth accumulation for our clients, for pension funds, for endowments, for sovereign wealth funds, we think about it systematically. We think about return on capital, we think about cost of capital, we think about the spread between the two. And that spread is what compounds over time to create wealth. For individuals, it's the same principle. Your after-tax income is your return. Your cost of living is your cost. The spread is your savings rate. And your savings rate, compounded over time at your investment return, determines your wealth. If you live in an expensive city, your cost is high, your spread is narrow, your savings rate is low, and your wealth accumulation is slow. If you live in a lower-cost city with reasonable income, your spread is wider, your savings rate is higher, and your wealth accumulation is faster. It's mathematics. It's not complicated, but most people don't think about it this way. They think about gross income. They think about prestige. They think about where their peers live. They don't think about the actual wealth equation. Now, let me address something important. Geographic arbitrage isn't just about moving from expensive cities to cheap cities. It's more nuanced than that. There are different tiers of arbitrage opportunity. The most extreme arbitrage is what I just described, high-cost city to low-cost city while maintaining a high income, usually through remote work. That's Tier 1. That's the most powerful version. Tier 2 is moving from a very high-cost city to a medium-cost city. New York to Charlotte, San Francisco to Austin. You still have good income opportunities in the medium-cost city, but the cost of living is substantially lower. This was the strategy that worked even before remote work became common. You could build a career in Austin or Nashville or Denver, earn good money, and accumulate wealth faster than your peers in coastal cities. Tier 3 is more subtle. It's choosing where within a metro area you live. Living in the suburbs versus the urban core. Living in a slightly less trendy neighborhood. Living in a smaller home than you could afford. These aren't dramatic arbitrage opportunities, but they add up over time. If you're paying $3,000 per month for rent in Brooklyn when you could pay $2,200 per month for comparable space in Queens, that's $9,600 per year. Over 10 years, that's $96,000 that could have been invested, which with compounding becomes $150,000 or more. And Tier 4 is international arbitrage, which is beyond the scope of what most people are willing to do, but it's worth mentioning. There are people who work for U.S. companies remotely while living in Portugal, in Thailand, in Mexico, in countries where the cost of living is 50% to 70% lower than the U.S. They're earning U.S. salaries, paying U.S. taxes, but living on local costs. This is extreme arbitrage, and it comes with challenges, time zones, visa issues, distance from family. But for some people, it's a viable strategy, especially in the accumulation phase of life. The point is, there are multiple levels at which you can use geography strategically to accelerate wealth building. And the key word there is strategically. This isn't about being cheap. This isn't about minimizing your quality of life. This is about being intentional. This is about making conscious trade-offs. This is about understanding what you're giving up and what you're gaining. Because here's the thing. There's no free lunch. Lower cost of living often comes with trade-offs. Smaller cities might have fewer cultural amenities. Fewer restaurants, fewer concerts and shows, less diversity, fewer direct flights, less public transportation, less walkability. These are real trade-offs. They matter. They affect your quality of life. And for some people, these trade-offs aren't worth it, even if it means slower wealth accumulation. But for other people, especially people in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, people who are in the accumulation phase of life, people who are focused on building wealth so they can have freedom and flexibility later, the trade-offs are absolutely worth it. You don't need to live in the most expensive city forever. You can make a strategic move for 10 or 15 years, build a substantial financial foundation, and then decide where you want to live based on lifestyle rather than pure financial optimization. This is what the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early, figured out years ago. They realized that if you optimize for savings rate, if you minimize your cost of living while maintaining reasonable income, you can compress decades of wealth accumulation into a much shorter time frame. And one of the most powerful ways to optimize your savings rate is through geographic arbitrage. I've watched this movement closely. I've read the blogs, the forums, the case studies. And what strikes me is how powerful the math is once you see it. People who move from San Francisco to Dallas or from New York to Pittsburgh while keeping their income level, they're not just improving their financial situation marginally. They're often doubling or tripling their savings rate. They're going from saving 10% of their income to saving 30% or 40%. And when you model that out over 10, 15, 20 years, the difference in wealth accumulation is staggering. At a 10% savings rate, it takes roughly 50 years to accumulate enough wealth to retire. At a 40% savings rate, it takes about 20 years. That's the difference between working until you're 72 and retiring at 45. That's the difference between financial stress for decades and financial independence in early middle age. And much of that difference can come from a single decision: where you choose to live. This is what I mean when I say that the location decision is worth 7 figures over your lifetime. I'm not exaggerating. Run the compound interest calculator. Model different savings rates. Model different timelines. The numbers are clear. If you can increase your savings rate from 15% to 35% by moving to a lower cost location, and you maintain that for 20 years, you're looking at an additional $500,000 to $1 million in wealth, depending on your income and investment returns. That's not theoretical. That's mathematical reality. And with remote work now firmly established, with companies increasingly comfortable with distributed workforces, with technology making it easy to collaborate from anywhere, the opportunity for geographic arbitrage is more accessible than it's ever been. You don't have to sacrifice career progression. You don't have to take a massive pay cut. You can have a high-powered career while living in a place that allows you to actually build wealth. This is the conversation we need to be having in personal finance. Not just invest in index funds, and max out your 401k, and avoid consumer debt, though all of those things are important. But also, think strategically about where you live, and understand the financial impact of your location, and consider whether geographic arbitrage could accelerate your path to financial independence. Because for most people, the return on moving to a lower cost location is higher than the return on any investment strategy I could recommend. If moving saves you $30,000 per year in living costs, that's equivalent to finding an investment that generates $30,000 per year risk-free. Show me an investment that does that. You can't, but you can do it through geographic arbitrage. This is what we're going to explore. How to quantify the geographic impact on your wealth. How to evaluate different locations. How to think about the trade-offs. How to make strategic location decisions. How to implement geographic arbitrage in your own life. Because this isn't abstract theory. This is actionable strategy. This is something you can do. Something that could dramatically change your financial trajectory. And I want to be clear. This isn't just for young people. This isn't just for people starting out. Yes, the impact is greatest if you make this decision early. Yes, you get more years of compounding. But even if you're 45 or 50 or 55, if you're still in the accumulation phase, if you're still trying to build wealth for retirement, geographic arbitrage can make a massive difference. Moving to a lower cost location for your last 10 or 15 years of working could be the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressed retirement. So let's stop ignoring geography. Let's stop pretending that location is just a lifestyle choice with no financial implications. Let's start treating it as what it is, one of the most important wealth variables. And let's figure out how to use it strategically to build the financial future you actually want. All right, let's talk about what actually determines the financial impact of where you live. Because when most people think about cost of living, they think about rent or mortgage payments. Maybe they think about groceries or gas prices. But the real analysis is much more comprehensive. And when you break it down systematically, when you look at all the components, the differences between locations become even more dramatic than they initially appear. I want to start with housing, because it's the biggest expense for most households, and it's where the arbitrage opportunity is most visible. But housing isn't just about the monthly payment. It's about the full economic picture. And that picture includes things most people never calculate. Let's take 2 comparable homes. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in a good school district, safe neighborhood, reasonable commute to employment centers. In San Jose, California, that home costs about $1.8 million. In Nashville, Tennessee, that same quality home costs about $450,000. That's a $1.35 million difference. Now let's break down what that difference actually means in financial terms. If you're buying the San Jose home, with 20% down, you need $360,000 for the down payment. Your mortgage is $1.44 million. At current interest rates, that's roughly $10,500 per month in principal and interest. Property taxes in California are about 1.1% of assessed value, so that's another $1,650 per month. Insurance is expensive in California, maybe $300 per month. So your total monthly housing cost is around $12,450. That's $149,400 per year. The Nashville home, with 20% down, you need $90,000 for the down payment. Your mortgage is $360,000. That's roughly $2,600 per month in principal and interest. Property taxes in Tennessee are about 0.7% of market value, so that's $260 per month. Insurance is cheaper, maybe $150 per month. Total monthly housing cost is around $3,010. That's $36,120 per year. The difference is $113,280 per year. Every year. That's not a one-time difference. That's an annual structural difference in your cost of living. Now, you might say, but Larry, the San Jose home will appreciate faster. It's in California. It's in Silicon Valley. Real estate always goes up there. And historically, that's been true, though it's not guaranteed to continue. But let's be generous and assume the San Jose home appreciates at 4% per year and the Nashville home appreciates at 3% per year. That's a 1% per year difference on the home value. On a $1.8 million home, 1% is $18,000 per year. So yes, you're building equity faster in San Jose. But you're also spending $113,280 more per year to live there. Even accounting for the faster appreciation, you're still $95,280 per year worse off in cash flow terms. And that $95,280, if you invest it instead of spending it on housing, compounds. At a 7% return, that $95,280 per year becomes $2.7 million over 15 years. Meanwhile, the extra 1% appreciation on your home gives you an additional $270,000 in home equity over that same period. Do you see the math here? You're giving up $2.7 million in investable wealth to gain $270,000 in home equity. That's not a good trade. That's not wealth optimization. That's lifestyle consumption disguised as investment. Now, I'm not saying homes are bad investments. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy a home. What I'm saying is that housing decisions need to be evaluated in the context of your overall wealth building strategy. And when you're paying 4x or 5x as much for housing in an expensive city versus a cheaper city, you need to be honest about what you're giving up. You're not just giving up the monthly payment difference. You're giving up the compounded investment returns on that difference. And over time, that's millions of dollars. But housing is just the beginning. Let's talk about taxes, because this is where geographic arbitrage gets really interesting. The federal tax code is the same everywhere. If you make $150,000, you pay the same federal income tax whether you live in Texas or New York. But state and local taxes vary wildly. And this variation can add up to tens of thousands of dollars per year. Take California. If you're making $150,000 in California, your state income tax is about 9.3%, which is roughly $14,000 per year. Compare that to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Nevada, Washington, states with no state income tax. That's $14,000 per year you keep just by living in a different state. Or compared to North Carolina, where the flat tax rate is 4.5%. That's $6,750 per year. You're still saving $7,250 per year versus California. And it's not just income tax. Property taxes vary significantly. New Jersey has the highest effective property tax rate at about 2.23%. Texas is high too at about 1.6%. But many states are much lower. Hawaii is 0.31%. Alabama is 0.37%. Delaware is 0.43%. On a $400,000 home, the difference between New Jersey's 2.23% and Delaware's 0.43% is over $7,000 per year. That's another $7,000 that you can save or invest instead of paying to the government. Sales taxes matter too. Combined state and local sales taxes range from 0 in some states to over 10% in others. If you're spending $50,000 per year on taxable goods and services, the difference between a 3% sales tax state and a 10% sales tax state is $3,500 per year. Again, money that could be invested instead. When you add it all up, when you combine state income tax differences, property tax differences, sales tax differences, you can easily have a $20,000 to $30,000 per year tax advantage just from choosing the right state. And unlike investment returns, which are uncertain, this is guaranteed. You will pay less in taxes. It's not a maybe, it's a certainty. At BlackRock, when we advise institutional clients on where to locate operations, tax considerations are always a major factor. Corporations understand this. They do state-by-state tax analysis. They calculate their effective tax rates. They make decisions based on after-tax returns. Individual investors should do the same thing. You should know what your effective total tax burden is. You should compare it across different states. You should factor it into your location decisions. Now let's talk about the other components of cost of living, because they add up more than you might think. Transportation costs vary significantly by location. In cities with good public transportation, you might not need a car. In most other places, you need one car per working adult. But car insurance rates vary by state. Michigan has the highest average rates, over $3,000 per year per vehicle. Maine has among the lowest, under $1,000 per year. Gas prices vary by state, largely due to state gas taxes. As I'm speaking now, California gas is about $1.50 per gallon more expensive than Texas gas. If you drive 12,000 miles per year in a car that gets 25 miles per gallon, that's 480 gallons per year, which is $720 per year in extra fuel costs. Healthcare costs vary by location too. Insurance premiums vary by state and region. The same health insurance plan that costs $400 per month in one state might cost $600 per month in another state. That's $2,400 per year. And if you're paying out of pocket for healthcare because you're self-employed or between jobs, provider costs vary significantly. A routine doctor's visit might cost $150 in one city and $300 in another. Childcare costs, if you have young children, vary enormously. In Massachusetts, average childcare costs are over $20,000 per year per child. In Mississippi, they're under $6,000 per year per child. If you have 2 children in daycare, that's a $28,000 per year difference. That's massive. That's more than many people save in a year total. Utilities vary based on climate and energy costs. Heating costs are high in cold climates. Cooling costs are high in hot climates. But the efficiency of the housing stock and local energy prices make a big difference. Electricity rates in Hawaii are about 30 cents per kilowatt hour. In Louisiana, they're about 9 cents. If you use 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, that's $210 per month in savings, $2,520 per year. Even groceries, which you wouldn't think would vary that much, actually do. The same basket of groceries can cost 20% to 30% more in expensive cities versus cheaper cities. Part of this is supply chain costs. Part is real estate costs passed through to retail prices. Part is wage costs for grocery store workers. But whatever the reason, it shows up in your budget. If you're spending $800 per month on groceries in an expensive city, you might spend $600 per month in a cheaper city. That's $2,400 per year. When you add up all these components, housing, taxes, transportation, healthcare, childcare, utilities, groceries, and all the other miscellaneous costs, the total difference in cost of living between expensive and cheap locations can easily be $50,000 to $80,000 per year for a household. And remember, this is after tax dollars. To have an extra $50,000 per year after taxes, you need to earn about $70,000 more in pre-tax income, assuming a 30% effective tax rate. So living in a cheaper location is economically equivalent to getting a $70,000 raise. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, Larry, I get it. Expensive cities are expensive, but don't you earn more in expensive cities? Doesn't that offset the cost difference? And yes, in many professions, you do earn more in expensive cities. But the key question is, does the income premium exceed the cost premium? This is where we need to look at occupation-specific data. Because the answer varies by profession. For some high-skill, high-demand professions, the income premium in expensive cities is substantial and does exceed the cost premium. If you're a software engineer at a top tech company, you might make $300,000 in San Francisco versus $150,000 in Austin. That's a $150,000 difference, which can overcome the cost of living difference and still leave you better off in absolute savings terms. But for most professions, the income premium is much smaller than the cost premium. Teachers make about 30% more in expensive cities, but their cost of living is 80% to 100% higher. Nurses make about 25% more. Accountants make about 20% more. Electricians make about 15% more. In all these cases, the income premium doesn't nearly offset the cost premium. You're worse off financially in the expensive city even though your nominal salary is higher. And even in high-income professions where the premium seems to justify the cost, you need to account for taxes. That $300,000 San Francisco tech salary, after federal taxes, state taxes, and FICA, nets you about $180,000. The $150,000 Austin salary, with no state income tax, nets you about $105,000. So your take-home difference is $75,000, not $150,000. And when you factor in the $50,000 to $60,000 higher cost of living in San Francisco, your actual additional savings capacity is only about $15,000 to $25,000 per year. That's significant, but it's not as overwhelming as the gross salary difference suggests. This is why you need to do the full analysis. You need to look at after-tax income. You need to look at actual cost of living. You need to calculate the net difference in savings capacity. And in many cases, you'll find that the geographic arbitrage opportunity is real even for high-income professions. But here's where remote work changes everything. If you can earn the San Francisco salary while living in Austin, you get the full $75,000 take-home difference in your favor. Your cost of living is lower, your taxes are lower, and your income is the same. That's the ultimate arbitrage. And for many knowledge workers, this is now possible. Companies are realizing they don't need everyone in the office. They're maintaining coastal salaries for remote workers, at least for now. And that creates an unprecedented opportunity for wealth building. Now, I need to talk about something that doesn't show up in cost of living calculators but matters enormously. The lifestyle inflation trap. When you live in an expensive city, there's social pressure to spend. Your coworkers are going to expensive restaurants. They're taking expensive vacations. They're wearing expensive clothes. They're driving expensive cars. And if you want to participate in that social life, if you want to fit in, you end up spending more than you would in a different environment. This is subtle. This is psychological. But it's real. I've seen it happen to young professionals at BlackRock. They move to New York. They're making good money, but they start spending like their peers. They go to $200 dinners. They buy $1,000 coats. They take $5,000 weekend trips. They upgrade their lifestyle to match their income and their social environment. And their savings rate stays low even though their income is high. Compare that to someone living in a mid-sized city. Their social environment is different. Their coworkers go to $50 dinners. They buy $200 coats. They take $2,000 vacations. The social norm is less expensive. And without even thinking about it consciously, they spend less. They keep up with their local peer group, but that peer group has lower consumption standards. This is why many people who move from expensive cities to cheaper cities find that they not only save the obvious cost difference, but they also save additional money because their discretionary spending naturally decreases. They're no longer trying to keep up with the expensive city lifestyle. They adjust to local norms. And those local norms are more conducive to wealth building. At BlackRock, we study behavioral finance. We understand how social influences affect financial decisions. And what the research shows is that people's spending is heavily influenced by their reference group, their peer comparison set. If your peers are spending lavishly, you spend lavishly. If your peers are more frugal, you're more frugal. This means that choosing a location isn't just about the objective cost of living. It's also about the subjective spending environment. And lower-cost cities generally have spending environments that are more conducive to saving. Now let me address the career concern, because this is the main objection people raise when I talk about geographic arbitrage. They say, Larry, if I move to a cheaper city, I'll sacrifice career opportunities. I'll earn less over my lifetime. I'll have fewer options for advancement. The short-term savings aren't worth the long-term career cost. And look, There's some truth to this for certain industries. If you want to work in finance at the highest levels, you probably need to be in New York, London, or Hong Kong, at least for part of your career. If you want to work in entertainment, you need Los Angeles. If you want to work in tech at cutting-edge companies, you need to be in or near Silicon Valley, at least to build your network and credentials. But for most people in most industries, this concern is overstated. There are good jobs in most mid-sized cities. There are hospitals in Nashville that need doctors and nurses. There are tech companies in Austin that need engineers. There are accounting firms in Charlotte that need accountants. You can build a solid, well-paying career in these places. You might not reach the absolute top tier of earnings. You might not become a partner at a top-tier law firm or an executive at a Fortune 50 company. But you can still have a very successful career with high five-figure or low six-figure income. And that income, combined with lower costs, can lead to faster wealth accumulation than a higher prestige, higher income career in an expensive city. Moreover, remote work has changed the calculus. You can now work for a top company while living anywhere. You can build your career with a prestigious employer without paying expensive city costs. This is the best of both worlds. And more companies are embracing this model. The key is to think strategically about career stages. Maybe you spend your 20s in an expensive city. You build your network. You develop skills. You establish credentials. Then in your 30s, once you've proven yourself, you negotiate remote work or you take your skills to a cheaper market. You've gotten the career benefits of the expensive city without paying those costs for your entire working life. This is smart arbitrage. This is strategic optimization. I also want to talk about quality of life, because financial optimization isn't everything. You need to enjoy your life. You need to be happy. And happiness doesn't come just from having a high net worth. It comes from relationships, community, activities, environment. And these things are available in all sorts of places, not just expensive coastal cities. In fact, many people find that their quality of life improves when they move to a cheaper location. They have more space. They have a yard. They have shorter commutes. They have more time. They're less stressed about money. They can afford to do things they enjoy without guilt. They join clubs. They have hobbies. They build community. And they're happier. I've talked to many people who made this move, who went from New York to Nashville or San Francisco to Austin or Boston to Raleigh. And the overwhelming majority say their quality of life improved. They don't feel like they sacrificed anything. They feel like they gained freedom, gained space, gained financial breathing room. Yes, they gave up some things. Fewer Michelin star restaurants, fewer Broadway shows, less walkability. But what they gained was more valuable to them. This is the critical insight. The relationship between cost and quality of life is not linear. Expensive cities offer more of certain things: cultural amenities, density, diversity, career opportunities. But beyond a certain threshold, the marginal improvement in quality of life from those additional amenities is small relative to the marginal cost. You're paying 80% more to get 20% more value. That's not a good exchange unless those specific amenities are extremely important to you personally. For most people, especially people in the wealth accumulation phase of life, people who are focused on building financial security so they can have freedom later, the better strategy is to optimize for savings rate rather than lifestyle maximization. Live in a place that allows you to save 30% or 40% of your income. Build your net worth. Create optionality. And then, once you have that financial foundation, you can decide where you want to live based purely on quality of life considerations. At that point, you can afford the expensive city if that's what you want. You have the freedom to choose. This is the paradox of geographic arbitrage. By making a short-term sacrifice, by living in a less expensive place during your accumulation years, you actually gain more freedom in the long run. You reach financial independence faster. You have more choices. You're not trapped by financial necessity. And ironically, many people who do this discover that they don't actually want to move back to the expensive city. They've built a life in the cheaper location. They have community. They have routines. They're happy. And they realize the expensive city lifestyle wasn't as essential as they thought. At BlackRock, our investment philosophy is about creating freedom and security for our clients. We want them to have options. We want them to be able to make decisions based on what they want, not based on what they can afford. And geographic arbitrage is one of the most powerful tools for creating that freedom. It's not about deprivation. It's not about living in a place you hate to save money. It's about being strategic. It's about understanding the trade-offs. It's about optimizing your life for the outcomes you actually want. So when we think about cost of living, we need to think comprehensively. Housing, taxes, transportation, healthcare, childcare, food, utilities, and all the hidden costs. We need to think about after-tax income, not gross income. We need to think about savings capacity, not just earnings. We need to think about lifestyle inflation and social spending pressures. We need to think about career implications over the full arc of our working life, not just the next few years. And we need to think about what actually makes us happy, not what we think should make us happy or what social convention says should make us happy. When you do this full analysis, when you look at all the factors, the case for strategic geographic arbitrage becomes overwhelming for most people. It's not right for everyone. If you're at the top of your field in an industry that requires expensive city presence, you might be better off staying. If expensive city amenities are truly central to your happiness and well-being, you might be better off staying. But for the vast majority of people, especially people trying to build wealth, strategic location choice is one of the highest return decisions you can make. And the best part is, it's not a permanent decision. You can try it. You can move to a cheaper location for 3 years, 5 years, see how it goes. If you hate it, you can move back. You haven't lost anything. You've saved money. You've built wealth. And you've gained information about what you actually want. But my prediction is, most people who make this move strategically don't move back. Because they realize the benefits are real and the costs are smaller than they feared. Alright, let's get practical. Because understanding the concept of geographic arbitrage is one thing, but actually implementing it, actually making a strategic location decision that accelerates your wealth building, that requires a systematic framework. And that's what I want to give you now. A step-by-step approach for evaluating locations, making decisions, and executing moves that maximize your financial outcomes while maintaining quality of life. The first step in any geographic arbitrage strategy is to calculate your current baseline. You need to know exactly where you stand financially in your current location. And I mean exactly. Not rough estimates. Not guesses. Real numbers. Start by tracking every dollar you spend for 3 months. Every single expense. Rent or mortgage, property taxes, insurance, utilities, groceries, restaurants, transportation, healthcare, entertainment, subscriptions, everything. Use a spreadsheet or an app, but capture it all. Because you can't optimize what you don't measure. Once you have 3 months of data, annualize it. Multiply by 4. Now you have your real annual spending. Not what you think you spend. Not what you wish you spent. What you actually spend. And I guarantee you, for most people, this number is higher than they think. Much higher. People consistently underestimate their spending, especially on small discretionary items that add up. The coffee, the takeout, the impulse purchases, the subscriptions they forgot about. Next, break down your spending into fixed and variable categories. Fixed costs are things you can't easily change in the short term. Housing, property taxes, insurance, car payments, student loan payments. Variable costs are things you have more control over. Food, entertainment, shopping, travel. This distinction matters because when you evaluate a new location, the fixed costs are what change most dramatically. Your rent or mortgage will be different. Your property taxes will be different. Your insurance rates will be different. But your variable costs might not change as much, especially if you maintain similar spending habits. Now calculate your savings rate. Take your after-tax income minus your annual spending. Divide by your after-tax income. That's your percentage. If you're making $100,000 after taxes and spending $70,000, your savings rate is 30%. This number is the most important metric in wealth building. More important than your income. More important than your investment returns. Because your savings rate determines how fast you accumulate capital, and capital accumulation is what creates financial independence. At BlackRock, when we model wealth accumulation for individuals, the savings rate is the primary input variable. Someone with a 40% savings rate will reach financial independence in roughly half the time as someone with a 20% savings rate, regardless of income level. This is mathematical reality. So knowing your current savings rate is essential for evaluating whether geographic arbitrage makes sense for you. Now, step 2. Identify potential target locations. And this is where you need to think strategically about your constraints and priorities. You can't just move to the cheapest city in America. You need a city that works for your career, your family situation, your lifestyle preferences. So create a list of criteria. Here's what I recommend considering. Employment opportunities in your field. If you're in tech, you need a city with a tech sector. If you're in healthcare, you need hospitals and medical centers. If you're in finance, you need financial services firms. Use job sites to research how many openings there are in your field in different cities. Look at which companies have offices there. Talk to people in your industry network about career viability in different markets. Climate and geography preferences. If you hate cold weather, you're not moving to Minneapolis. If you need proximity to mountains for hiking and skiing, you're looking at different cities than if you want beaches. If you have seasonal affective disorder, you need sunlight. These aren't frivolous considerations. Your physical environment affects your well-being and productivity. Be honest about what you need. Family situation. If you have kids, school quality matters enormously. If you have aging parents, proximity to them might matter. If you're single and want to date, you need a city with a population that supports that. If you're married and your spouse has a career too, you need a city with opportunities for both of you. Family considerations can be constraining, but they're real, and they need to be factored in. Cultural and social amenities. What do you actually do for fun? If you go to concerts and museums every week, you need a city that offers that. If you're outdoorsy and spend every weekend hiking, you need proximity to nature. If you never use cultural amenities and mostly spend time with friends at home, you don't need to pay premium prices for urban density. Match the city's offerings to your actual usage patterns, not to what you think you should want. Once you have your criteria, create a shortlist. Maybe 5 to 10 cities that meet your baseline requirements. Then it's time for step 3, detailed financial analysis of each target location. And this is where the rubber meets the road. You need to model what your financial life would look like in each location. Start with housing. Use Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, whatever tools you prefer. Find actual homes or apartments in your target cities that would meet your needs. Look at prices if you're buying. Look at rents if you're renting. Be realistic. Don't compare your current 2-bedroom apartment to a 4-bedroom house in a new city. Compare apples to apples. Find equivalent housing. And make sure you're looking at neighborhoods you'd actually want to live in. Safe. Good schools if relevant. Reasonable commute to employment centers. Calculate the monthly cost for each location. If you're buying, include mortgage principal and interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, WA fees if applicable, and maintenance reserves. If you're renting, it's simpler. Rent plus renter's insurance. Now compare these numbers to your current housing cost. What's the difference? Next, research taxes. Every state has a Department of Revenue website with tax calculators. Plug in your expected income. Calculate state income tax. Look up property tax rates and calculate your expected property tax. Look up sales tax rates. Add it all up. Compare to what you're paying now in taxes. What's the difference? For other cost categories, use cost of living calculators, but verify with local research. Look at grocery store prices on Instacart or local delivery sites. Look at gas prices on GasBuddy. Look at utility costs by calling local utility companies or checking their websites. Look at car insurance by getting actual quotes from insurance companies. Look at healthcare by researching insurance premiums in that state's marketplace. Compile all this data into a spreadsheet. Create a column for your current location and a column for each target location. Put every major expense category in rows. Fill in the numbers. Now you can see exactly what the cost difference is. And more importantly, you can calculate what your projected savings rate would be in each location, assuming your income stays constant or adjusts by the typical amount for your profession in that market. This spreadsheet is your decision tool. It quantifies the financial impact of each location. And when you see the numbers, when you see that you could increase your savings rate from 20% to 35% by moving to a specific city, the decision becomes clearer. You're not guessing. You're not relying on gut feel. You have data. But financial analysis alone isn't sufficient. Step 4 is quality of life assessment. Because you're going to live in this place, you need to actually like it. So once you've identified financially attractive locations, you need to visit them. I'm serious. Don't move somewhere you've never been. Take a long weekend. Better yet, take a week. Stay in a residential neighborhood, not in a hotel downtown. Walk around. Drive around. Go to grocery stores. Go to coffee shops. Try to get a feel for daily life. Talk to people who live there. If you know anyone in that city, have dinner with them. Ask them what they like and don't like. Ask about traffic, about weather, about schools, about community. Join local Facebook groups or subreddits for those cities and read what residents are talking about. What are they complaining about? What are they celebrating? This gives you unfiltered local perspective. And most importantly, imagine your daily routine in that place. Where would you live? Where would you work? How would you get there? What would you do on weekends? Can you see yourself being happy there? This isn't a financial question. This is a life question. And it matters enormously. Because if you're miserable in a cheaper city, you're not going to stay. And if you don't stay long enough for the financial benefits to compound, the arbitrage doesn't work. Now, step 5. Negotiate your employment situation. If you're planning to work remotely for your current employer, you need to have that conversation before you move. Don't assume. Don't just move and hope it works out. Schedule a meeting with your manager. Explain that you want to relocate but continue in your current role. Make the case for why this works. Emphasize your track record. Emphasize your productivity. Emphasize that you'll maintain the same hours, the same availability, the same output. Some companies are fully remote now and this will be an easy conversation. Other companies are hybrid and this might require negotiation. And some companies still require office presence and this might not be possible. You need to know before you commit to a move. And if your current employer won't support remote work, you might need to find a new job in your target city before moving. That's fine. That's just part of the process. But do it in order. Don't burn bridges. Don't move first and scramble later. Also, discuss compensation. Some companies are moving to location-based pay, adjusting salaries based on where you live. If you're moving from San Francisco to Dallas, they might reduce your salary to match Dallas market rates. You need to know this up front. And you need to model whether the financial arbitrage still works with the adjusted salary. In many cases, it still does. A 20% pay cut combined with a 40% cost of living reduction still leaves you better off. But you need to do the math. At BlackRock, we've had to think through these issues as we've adapted to remote work. And what we've found is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Some roles require office presence. Some don't. Some people are more productive remotely. Some aren't. It's case by case. But the companies that are handling this well are the ones having explicit conversations, setting clear expectations, and documenting agreements. That's what you need to do too. Step 6. Plan the logistics of the move. This is less exciting than the financial modeling, but it's critically important. Moving is expensive, disruptive, and stressful. You need to minimize that. Start by decluttering. Moving is an opportunity to get rid of stuff you don't need. The less you move, the cheaper and easier it is. Sell things. Donate things. Throw things away. You don't need to bring everything. Get moving quotes from multiple companies. Understand what's included and what's not. Some companies pack for you. Some don't. Some provide insurance. Some don't. Read reviews carefully. Moving fraud is real. There are companies that lowball the quote, show up, load your stuff, and then demand more money or they won't deliver. Use reputable national companies or get strong local referrals. Set up utilities and services in your new city before you arrive. Internet, electricity, water, whatever applies. Set up mail forwarding with USPS. Update your address with banks, credit cards, insurance companies, employer, IRS. This is tedious administrative work, but if you don't do it, you'll have problems later. And think about timing. If you have kids, you probably want to move during summer so they can start the new school year fresh. If you're renting, you need to time it with your lease end to avoid paying double rent. If you're selling a home and buying a home, the coordination is complex and you might need temporary housing. Think through the sequencing. Make a timeline. Work backwards from when you want to be fully settled. Step 7, and this is critical. Maintain perspective during the transition. Moving is stressful. You're going to have moments of doubt. You're going to miss things about your old location. You're going to encounter frustrations in your new location. Things won't work exactly how you expected. That's normal. That's part of adaptation. Don't let short-term discomfort make you question the whole decision. Give yourself at least 6 months to adjust before evaluating whether the move was right. It takes time to build routines. It takes time to make friends. It takes time to learn where things are. It takes time to feel at home. People who move and then immediately decide they made a mistake, they usually haven't given it enough time. They're reacting to transition stress, not to the actual quality of the new location. And be proactive about building community. Join things. Go to meetups. Take classes. Volunteer. Introduce yourself to neighbors. Accept social invitations even when you don't feel like it. Community doesn't just happen. You have to create it. And especially if you're moving to a smaller city from a bigger city, You might need to be more intentional about finding your people. They exist, but you have to seek them out. Now let me address some specific scenarios and how geographic arbitrage applies to each. First, young professionals in their 20s. This is the highest return demographic for geographic arbitrage. You probably don't have kids yet. You probably don't own a home. You're mobile. You can go anywhere. And every dollar you save in your 20s has 40 years to compound. That's enormous leverage. My advice for young professionals: spend your early 20s building skills and credentials. If that requires expensive city presence for a few years, fine. But by your late 20s, seriously consider moving to a lower-cost location. Your career foundation is established. Your network is built. You can maintain those connections remotely. And the next 15 years are your prime accumulation years. Optimize for savings rate. Live in a place where you can save 40% of your income. If you do that from 28 to 43, you can have $500,000 to $750,000 saved, depending on income and returns. That's the foundation for financial independence by your 50s. Second, families with children. Your constraints are tighter. School quality matters. Proximity to grandparents might matter. Stability matters because you don't want to move kids multiple times. But geographic arbitrage is still powerful. And frankly, it might be most powerful for families because the cost savings are largest. Housing costs, childcare costs, these are the biggest components of family budgets. Moving to a lower-cost city could save you $50,000 to $80,000 per year for a family of 4. That's transformational. My advice for families: prioritize school districts and family-friendly communities in your target location search. These exist in affordable cities. You don't need to pay expensive city prices to get good schools. Many mid-sized cities in the South and Southeast have excellent public schools. Do the research. Talk to parents who live there. Visit schools if possible. And recognize that the financial security you're building by living in a cheaper location is a gift to your children. You're not sacrificing their well-being. You're securing their future. Third, mid-career professionals in their 40s and 50s. You're probably more established. You might own a home. Your kids might be in school. You might feel locked in. But you're not. And actually, geographic arbitrage in your 40s and 50s can be incredibly powerful because these are your peak earning years. If you can maintain high income while dramatically cutting costs, you can turbocharge your retirement savings. My advice for mid-career professionals: if you're behind on retirement savings, if you're looking at your 401k balance and realizing it's not enough, geographic arbitrage might be your best option. You probably can't increase your income dramatically at this stage, but you can decrease your costs dramatically. And the 10 to 15 years before retirement are critical. If you can increase your savings rate from 15% to 40% for those years, you can potentially double or triple your retirement nest egg. That's the difference between working until 70 and retiring at 62. Fourth, early retirees. If you've built wealth and you're considering early retirement, the math of geographic arbitrage changes slightly. You're not trying to accumulate anymore. You're trying to make your capital last. And one of the best ways to extend portfolio longevity is to reduce your withdrawal rate. Living in a lower-cost location reduces the amount you need to withdraw each year, which reduces sequence of returns risk, which increases the probability your money lasts. My advice for early retirees: seriously consider retiring to a lower-cost location even if you lived in an expensive city during your working years. You don't need to be near the office anymore. You don't need to optimize for career advancement. You can optimize purely for quality of life and cost. Many people find that they're actually happier in retirement in a smaller city. Less stress, more space, closer community, and their retirement savings last longer. And fifth, people considering international arbitrage. This is the most extreme version. Living in Portugal or Mexico or Thailand on a U.S. income or U.S. retirement savings. The cost savings can be enormous. But so are the logistical and personal challenges. Language barriers, healthcare systems you're unfamiliar with, distance from family, visa requirements, cultural adjustment. My advice for international arbitrage: try before you commit. Spend a few months in a country before you move there permanently. Understand the actual day-to-day reality, not the vacation fantasy. Talk to other expats about the challenges. Research healthcare access. Research tax implications, because some countries tax worldwide income and that could eliminate the arbitrage benefit. And make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. If you genuinely love the country and want to live there, great. But if you're only doing it to save money and you'll be miserable, it's not worth it. Now, let me talk about the psychological and emotional aspects of geographic arbitrage, because these are often the biggest barriers. People know rationally that moving to a cheaper location would improve their financial situation. But they don't do it. Why? Fear, inertia, identity, social pressure, fear of the unknown. They've never lived anywhere else. They don't know if they'll like it. They worry they'll regret it. And this fear keeps them stuck. The solution is information and reversibility. Visit potential locations. Talk to people who've made similar moves. Remind yourself that it's not permanent. You can always move back if it doesn't work out. Making a reversible decision is less scary than making an irreversible one. Inertia. It's just easier to stay put. Moving is work. It's disruptive. It requires effort and coordination. And humans are wired to avoid effort and disruption. We stick with the status quo even when the status quo isn't optimal. The solution is to focus on the long-term benefit. Yes, moving is hard for a few months. But the financial benefit compounds for decades. You're trading short-term discomfort for long-term gain. That's a good trade. Identity. For some people, especially in expensive coastal cities, where they live is part of their identity. They're a New Yorker. They're a San Franciscan. They define themselves by their location. And moving feels like losing part of who they are. The solution is to recognize that you're more than your location. Your identity is your values, your relationships, your skills, your character. Not your zip code. You can maintain your identity anywhere. Social pressure. Friends and family in expensive cities often react negatively to news that you're moving. They act like you're abandoning them. They make you feel guilty. They question your decision. And this social friction makes it hard to pull the trigger. The solution is to be confident in your reasoning. If you've done the analysis, if you know this is the right financial decision for you, don't let other people's reactions deter you. Real friends will support you. And you can maintain relationships across distance. At BlackRock, I've seen these psychological barriers play out countless times. We've had talented people turn down opportunities in less expensive locations because they couldn't imagine leaving New York or San Francisco. And I respect that. It's their choice. But I also see the financial consequences. They're still renting in their 40s. They're stressed about money. They haven't built the wealth they could have. And I wonder if they really understood the trade-off they were making. The point is, geographic arbitrage isn't for everyone. But it should at least be considered by everyone. It should be an active choice, not a passive default. You should run the numbers. You should evaluate alternatives. You should make an informed decision about whether the financial benefit is worth the lifestyle change. And if you decide to stay in an expensive city, that's fine. But you should do it with full awareness of what it's costing you. Let me close with this. I started this conversation by telling you that moving to a different city could cut 10 years off your path to financial independence. And I want to emphasize, this is not hyperbole. This is mathematical reality. If you can increase your savings rate from 20% to 40% through geographic arbitrage, you will reach financial independence in roughly half the time. That might be the difference between 30 years and 15 years. That might be the difference between retiring at 65 and retiring at 50. And those 15 extra years of freedom, those are priceless. Those are years you can spend with your family. Years you can spend on projects you're passionate about. Years you can spend traveling, learning, contributing. Years you get back from the grind of mandatory employment. That's what we're really talking about when we talk about geographic arbitrage. Not just saving money, but buying back your time. Buying back your freedom. Buying back your life. At BlackRock, we manage trillions of dollars. We optimize portfolios. We generate returns. But I'll tell you something. For most people, the return on a strategic location decision is higher than the return on any portfolio optimization I can offer. Moving from an expensive city to an affordable city with a good job market, that's a guaranteed 20% to 30% increase in savings capacity. Show me an investment strategy that guarantees that kind of return. You can't. It doesn't exist. So if you're serious about building wealth, if you're serious about financial independence, if you're serious about creating freedom in your life, you need to seriously consider geographic arbitrage. You need to run the numbers. You need to evaluate locations. You need to visit places. You need to have hard conversations with your partner or spouse. You need to overcome inertia and fear. You need to make an active decision. And if you decide geographic arbitrage is right for you, if you decide to make a strategic move, you need to execute it well. Use the framework I've given you. Do thorough financial analysis. Assess quality of life carefully. Negotiate your employment situation explicitly. Plan the logistics meticulously. Give yourself time to adjust. Build community intentionally. And track your progress. Measure your actual savings rate in the new location. Make sure you're capturing the financial benefit you modeled. Because here's the thing. Geographic arbitrage only works if you actually save the money you're no longer spending. If you move to a cheaper city but inflate your lifestyle to fill the cost difference, you haven't arbitraged anything. You've just traded one consumption pattern for another. The discipline is in maintaining your spending level while your cost basis decreases. That's how you capture the spread. That's how you turn geographic difference into wealth accumulation. This is your opportunity. Remote work has opened up possibilities that didn't exist 5 years ago. You can have a high-powered career without expensive city costs. You can build wealth faster than any previous generation could. But you have to seize it. You have to make intentional decisions. You have to be strategic. And I want to emphasize, this isn't about deprivation. This isn't about living in a place you hate to pinch pennies. This is about finding a place where you can live well and build wealth simultaneously. Those places exist. There are dozens of cities in America where you can have a great quality of life, raise a family, build a career, enjoy amenities, and save 35% to 40% of your income. You just have to find them. You just have to be willing to look. So here's my challenge to you. Even if you're not ready to move right now, even if you're perfectly happy where you are, do the analysis. Run the numbers. Calculate what your financial situation would be in 3 other cities. See what the savings rate difference would be. Quantify the wealth accumulation difference over 10 years, 20 years. Make it concrete. Make it real. Because once you see the numbers, once you understand what you're giving up by staying in an expensive location, you can't unsee it. And maybe you'll decide the trade-off is worth it. Maybe you'll decide the expensive city offers things you can't get elsewhere. That's fine. That's a legitimate choice. But at least you'll be choosing consciously. You'll be making an informed decision based on real trade-offs rather than defaulting to the path of least resistance. And if the numbers show you that geographic arbitrage could dramatically improve your financial trajectory, if the analysis reveals that you could reach financial independence 10 or 15 years sooner by making a strategic move, then you have a choice to make. And that choice is going to determine your financial future. Choose wisely, choose strategically, and choose based on the life you actually want, not the life others expect you to live. This is your wealth. This is your freedom. This is your one life. Make decisions that align with your goals. And if geographic arbitrage can help you reach those goals faster, don't let fear or inertia or social pressure stop you. You deserve to build the financial security that gives you real choices. And location might be the most powerful lever you have to make that happen.